afternoon. I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to the Conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm glad to be here with you, and thank you for being here with us. Special thanks to my friend and colleague, brother Ndugu Yusef Mjini, who stood in for me yesterday when I was getting cataract surgery. Interesting. The idea of surgery is always something you have to take seriously. I was told by other family members who had the procedure that it's quick and painless, and the results can be just phenomenal. And a day into it, I'm feeling phenomenal results, seeing better already, and kind of excited about the possibility of doing the other eye in 2 weeks. So hats off to my docs and to the people in the profession, the healing arts. It's amazing what they can do for our bodies, and for that we must always show gratitude and be grateful. And as I think about that, I'm thinking about Imhotep, the African father of medicine, of modern science. So I think it's worthwhile us that we reflect on the genealogies that we flow from, recognizing that in us, through us, are retentions or memories or DNA of the original item. And so that's something to think about and feel good about, but also explore, because it'll help you be confident in your movement through today, your movement into tomorrow. Well, as always, we are going to have a great show today. A lot of interesting topics to talk about and great people to talk about them. What's on my mind and probably on your mind is the increased spate of violence all around the country. And we wanted to start off by talking about some of those things, in particular, the sort of a recap on what happened in Kansas City, where a man was arrested in shooting a teenager. Also, the man who fatally shot a 20-year-old, Ralph Yarl in Kansas City, and more. Let me bring in Brother Yusef Mjini first, just to start the conversation. Yusef, how you doing, man?
Very good. Thank you, brother. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Let's talk first about the one I've got pulled up is the man who fatally shot 20-year-old Kaylin Gillis after car turned in wrong driveway. It says he's going to be remaining in jail. What do you know about that story?
Well, this was a young white girl who, with her friends, was trying to find the house of some other friends, and they turned into the wrong driveway where they came under fire from the man senior who lived in the home there. And the driveway was so wide that it could easily be mistaken for a street. And they were trying to turn around or get some directions or find out if that was the place they were looking for or not, and suddenly found themselves under fire. And this was in New York, but these were all white people involved, which I think is an important sign that these are not just issues of concern in the Black community or in communities of color, because these were, young adults, going over to friends' houses. And we find this situation in 3 different incidents where people accidentally got in the wrong car, rang the wrong doorbell, drove up the wrong driveway, trying to turn around or get directions, and found that their lives were in danger. In one instance, a cheerleader in Texas they went out and were looking for friends and came out of a restaurant and got in the wrong car, and then got in their own car, apologized, and were attempting to drive away when they were shot. One of the young white girls, the one in New York, was killed. The 2 of the young cheerleaders who got in the wrong car in Texas were shot, and they did apprehend the young man who shot them. And again, they had apologized, got out of the car, got in their own car, and were driving off when the gentleman got out of the car they had accidentally got into. And there was no confrontation, no theft, no drama. Just the car. They thought that was the car that they had arrived in, and opened the door and climbed in and saw a gentleman in there who pulled a gun on them and apologized and immediately got out and were driving off when they were shot at, and two of them were hit by the young man whose car they had gotten into. The young lady Gillis in New York died from gunshots that she received when they drove up the wrong driveway. And in Kansas City, Missouri, the young man is a member of a Liberian immigrant family. He plays in the school orchestra. He's an outstanding student.
Ralph Yarl, 16.
As a child, his mother asked him to go to 115th Street to pick up his two younger siblings, and he went to 115th Parkway, which was a block away. And he lived 2 blocks from this address, went up to the door, rang the doorbell. Now, there was an inside door and there was a storm door. The 84-year-old white male occupant of the house opened up the inside door and then shot the young child in the head through the storm door, through the door. The young child didn't try to open the door. There was no confrontation. He thought he was at the home where his 2 younger siblings were playing with some other children, just 2 blocks from his own home.
Right.
Got shot in the head, fell down on the porch, and the man shot him again in the arm. And he got up and fled, went to one house that refused to help him, went to another house that refused to help him, went to a third house where he was told to get down on the ground and keep his arms above his head because they didn't know whether he was the shooter or the victim. He attempted to try and find another house, passed out on the sidewalk in the driveway in a pool of blood. And at that point, they decided to call 911 to get him some assistance, but went to 3 different houses to try and find help after he had been shot twice for ringing the wrong doorbell. This is just absolutely crazy, Al. Now, the major implication, and Angela may want to join in on this conversation, is that the 84-year-old gentleman who shot the 16, 17-year-old Liberian immigrant is claiming self-defense under the Stand Your Ground law. We have talked in the past about an organization in Florida called ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council. And every month they send out draft legislation to every Republican state legislator in the country. They also send it out to Republican members of county boards, city councils, town halls, villages, etc. And they were one of the groups that sent a draft of the Stand Your Ground law across the country. Now, if Stand Your Ground sounds familiar, it's because it was the defense that George Zimmerman used when he murdered Trayvon Martin in 2007. Okay, and that's the first time there was a lot of national discussion. There are 30 states that have Stand Your Ground laws, and the distinction is that the Castle Doctrine, states that have the Castle Doctrine allow you to use deadly force to defend yourself in your home and on your personal property. Stand Your Ground law does not require that you retreat in public if you feel threatened or that you are in danger of deadly harm or being seriously injured. You have the right to defend yourself with deadly force. Now, the distinction in terms of the young lad in Kansas City, Missouri, is that he made no attempt to cross the threshold
Right.
of the gentleman whose doorbell he rang. And again, there is no requirement and Missouri is a stand your ground state. There's no requirement that you retreat from a public setting if you feel your life is in danger or that you may suffer severe harm. So this brings up the question all over again, because the police told George Zimmerman, do not follow the young black man. Do not engage with him. Okay. We are coming. We will stop and question him. Do not intervene. And George Zimmerman, as we know, wound up shooting and murdering
Right.
Trayvon Martin because the scuffle ensued. Trayvon Martin, again, was going to his father's house, who lived in this community. And George Zimmerman was one of the self-appointed posse comitatus,
Vigilantes, yeah. Street patrol.
vigilantes, whatever
Yeah.
they call themselves, who take it upon themselves with guns to patrol these premises and that neighborhood. So you've got the cheerleaders who get in the wrong car. You've got the young ladies who turn into the wrong driveway. And you've got the young lad who rings the doorbell looking for his two younger brothers because his mother has sent him 2 blocks to pick them up and bring them home. So just 3 tragic incidents, one of them resulting in the murder of a young white girl. The other 2 young white girls in the car were shot by the person whose car they accidentally entered. And then the young boy shot in the head. And this was such an exemplary young man, which just makes it all the more worse. You know, played in the school orchestra, was an excellent student, came from a good family. And this shows that this could happen to anybody's children who pull in the wrong driveway, who get in the wrong car, or who ring the wrong doorbell. And
Let's bring Angela Rose Myers in. Angela, good afternoon. Good to see you. It's been a minute. Also, Yogi Sena is here from Bahia, Brazil. Yogi, good to see you as well. Sam Cooke online has said that it's obvious that fear is an underlying issue in our country. And shout out to both Michelle Patterson and Power 96 for their comments. And I want to invite anybody else who's listening or watching to comment, to join the conversation by dropping a message in the comment section. We want your voice. And also remind you that we want to grow these conversations by having you subscribe to our channel. You may be watching this from either YouTube or Twitter or LinkedIn or on the NNPA YouTube channel. Great, thank you. We appreciate it. We want you to take a minute, though, to go over to the Insight News YouTube channel and subscribe to the channel. We want to grow our subscriber base to 1,000. We've crossed 300, heading to 400, and your decision to join matters. Angela Rose, my friend, good to see you, and thank you for being here. So this is a big topic. How do you jump in wherever you want to, but key questions that I want to make sure that you and Yogi and Yusef continue with. How do the stand your ground laws and the cancel doctrine impact the interpretation of self-defense as we've described it here, as Yusef described it, and what are the potential consequences of these laws on public safety given the overlay of the racial dynamics? And therefore, is there a balance to the right to self-defense with the need to prevent unnecessary violence and racial disparities? Is that highlighted in the cases in Missouri, Texas, and New York? And I've got more questions. Let me start with those. Angela, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would just, I want to raise also the name of the young woman in Texas, Peyton Washington, who is still undergoing medical response. And so she has blonde hair, but to me, she looks like family. She looks, light skinned black, but I'm not sure that I haven't found any any news reporting on her race.
Mhm.
And so I'll just say that. Okay. But second of all, I would say when in terms of the stand your ground law and also the conception of the where we are right now in the US, just as your respondent said, right, there's a heightened fear of violence, and there's also a lot of guns on the street. And there's a distrust of the traditional institutions of justice. So I see this as well as a state failure, right? When people feel like they need to take things into their own hands instead of, an institution, right? That okay, it used to be call the police, right? Nobody wants to call the police because they fear that the police will just harm the situation. And it used to be before the police, you would go ask somebody, hey, what are you doing? Hey, what's going on? But I agree that there's a lot of fear. And then also there's folks who have ingrained in them the belief that they have a right, that the first response will be a violent one. And so that's where the stand your ground doctrine comes into play, because where I see it, right, that is absolutely the opposite end of what happened with the young man in Missouri. Is first you ask somebody knocking on your door, who's there? Who's there? Oh, sorry, things like that. And I'm trying to understand where stand your ground laws come in, where they validate killing a person when that shooting a young man is your first response. When is shooting someone your first response, right? And so that's some of
Through the
things.
door.
Exactly. I mean, through the door. And so those are some of the things that stand your ground law actually validates, which is a grave consequence. We're becoming a shoot first, ask questions later country. And that's not community healing. That's not public safety. That's not, if there's no institution there that people feel like they can rely on to call in terms of intervention, if they feel like they're getting robbed or something, then we're in a shoot first, ask question later country, and that's a failure of our society as well, and a state failure.
Well, so what, Angela, yourself, increasingly people in our community are saying that we also are sick and tired of the violence that we inflict on each other, and that we owe it to ourselves and to our families and to our neighborhoods to be advocates for safety, even if that advocacy means that we adopt policies and postures that require the subduing and the jailing, the locking up of people that are committing violent crimes against us, our friends, our families, our neighbors. And that is said uh, despite sort of an ambivalence that's based on the historicity of our relationship with law enforcement. So my answer has been this. I wrote a piece several years ago that I delivered at the state legislature once upon a time that was called Black Crime, Black Punishment. And how then do we insert ourselves on both sides of the justice equation so that we articulate our will for peace and tranquility, for safety, and for prosperity in the community, and also articulate our obligation to act, to create both policy and practice that originates from us, that respects us, that is not based on fear of us as a public policy, but based on our own appreciation for safety, for life, for prosperity, and our commitment to organize and defend that opportunity for all of our people. And in this case, when I say our people, I'm saying all of humanity, starting with my neighbors, my neighborhood, my sons and daughters. And so, how do we have this debate about uh, the reality? Well, I would say reality that some people may have to be incarcerated for the good of the entire society, uh, on the one hand, but on the other hand, we don't want wholesale um, warehousing of our people, which has been policy in the past. Whether the person was guilty or not, it didn't matter. It was convenient, or it was a business proposition. If it's a business proposition, why don't we make it our business? And so I say that I wrote that, the jails, if we have them, ought to be in our neighborhoods, employing our neighbors, our mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, daughters, police officers and probation officers and judges and social workers and therapists out of our neighborhood, the people that do the food service, that do the building and the grounds and the delivery services associated with maintaining that our people, as opposed to offshoring or sending out the quote unquote problem, so that the problem itself is perceived as a revenue stream for other communities. Maybe I'm going too far. Yusuf, what do you think? Angela, what do you think? And I'm going to bring Yoji in to talk about that from Brazil. Yusuf, go ahead.
Well, if you get a concealed carry permit, Al, every few years, you have to go through the training, the education, the classroom, and the fire range demonstration before you can renew that concealed carry permit.
Like a driver's license.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And they're called red flag laws, where if a person is experiencing anxiety or temporary mental depression and other debilitating things that make them, I don't want to say unfit, but probably better off not possessing a firearm,
right,
given their health and medical state at that particular point in time, mm-hmm. until they recover. Now, the grandson, and people in the listening and viewing audience are chiming in today. The grandson reported of the 84-year-old man in Kansas City, Missouri, that he spends all day long sitting in his chair watching right-wing conservative talk show programs, okay? And we know what kind of message they're sharing about crime, about immigrants, about poor people, about people of color, about Democrats. So he was steeped in this fear, and people generally tend to fear anything that they don't know or don't understand, whether it's skydiving or driving or somebody ringing their doorbell. Somebody rang our doorbell the other night after midnight, and we just did not answer it, okay? Yeah. It turned out to be somebody dropping off some keys for a friend of our daughter that they left between the storm door and the regular door, which we found the next morning, but we weren't even going to ask who it was, okay? Mm-hmm. Because it was too late. The house was dark and everybody was sleeping.
Yeah.
But, this 84-year-old man who watches nothing but Fox News and these other, very conservative programs, he also said that his grandfather often made anti-Black comments, anti-gay comments, homophobic comments about immigrants. So he had already declared that anybody who didn't look like him did not have his best interests at heart, regardless of what their motivation was. We need to do background checks. We need to make certain that people who own and possess firearms, whether they have a concealed carry permit or not, are mentally competent and are proficient enough that they don't accidentally shoot or even kill the wrong person, and that gun does not wind up in the hands of someone who is not, breaking the law in terms of purchasing and or possessing and carrying it. And, Minnesota is not a stand your ground state. It is not a castle law state, not yet anyway. And I just want to say this for people who are listening in Minnesota. If you feel that your life is in danger or threatened, you have a responsibility first to make every attempt to flee or to get away from them. You can't just stand there and say, if you come 1 foot closer, I'm going to blow your brains out, because you will be charged. Remember in Little Falls, the man who lived near Lindbergh's home. People had broken into his home and robbed him, burglarized it on a number of occasions.
Two
He
teenagers.
hid in the basement,
Yeah.
and a young man came down the basement. He shot the young man. Then the young man was lying on the floor bleeding. He shot him again.
Mm-hmm.
Then the young man's girlfriend came down the steps. He shot her,
Mm-hmm.
and then she fell on the floor bleeding, and he shot her again when she was, far, far beyond being able to pose a physical threat or harm him. He went to jail for life for murder, for killing those two people, for shooting them after he had stopped, their progress and they were on the floor. So, now there may be a situation where you can't flee. If they come in your house, there's only one way in or out and you can't move. You got to do what you got to do to protect yourself. We don't want to see anybody get harmed or killed, but you can't just shoot somebody, and this applies in public. And, somebody once told me that if somebody comes up on your porch and is messing with you and you shoot him, you better drag them in your house before the police get there.
I've heard that before too. Angela, whose responsibility? What is our responsibility in having equity, ownership, authorship of the apparatus of public safety? And public's too big a word, but of the safety of our families, ourselves, our community, the spaces where we are. How do we evolve an understanding and an awareness of our duty to both create and maintain a system that allows us to be healthy and safe, productive, living without fear? And what's the cost of that? Because that's the problem. It's a costly proposition. We are kept out of the revenue stream associated with that. Instead, we are assigned the role of being the product, the trafficked. And it's by processes and systems that, in my mind, in part, are engineered to make us more likely to be transgressors, right? And therefore perceived as the problem that they can they can easily shoot and kill or stop or incarcerate. Angela, what do you think? And then Yoji, I'm going to bring you in.
Yeah, I think of yesterday, I was watching a video of Colombia's vice president, Francia Marquez, and something that she had said was around like this aspect of violence that was happening in Colombia, how Black men and Black youth were being killed by gun violence in Colombia. And her point of view is very similar to a poet. Her name is Juanita Petres Nasa, and she has a poem that's "Could we please give the police departments to the grandmothers?" And so I think even internationally, Black women particularly are asking this very same question of how can we restructure our idea of violence prevention to community healing, to getting community resources, to building up almost social foundations of accountability and responsibility. So, this is a good question because even in Minneapolis, we're struggling with this. The city of Minneapolis is having their third precinct discussions about where to put the third precinct, what the plans are going to be. And throughout these discussions, a number of community members have come out and said, we don't even want the third precinct building to be there. We don't. We want fewer police and we want more violence prevention. So what does violence prevention really look like when I live in Florida in a permitless, it's a permitless carry state. You can have a concealed weapon, no permit in Florida starting like July 1st, right? And as long as you have a valid ID. So, what does that mean? What does it look like to create community safety? And this word safety is really, is subjective. What's safe, right? And what is community safety when everybody has a gun? And I feel like maybe I need a gun. If these
Mhm.
white supremacists are saying all of this stuff from the Oklahoma sheriff saying, yeah, let's go lynch some black people. I'm black. Maybe I want a gun,
Yeah.
right? I live in a
Mhm.
permitless carry state and everybody has a gun. And we've had mass shootings in Florida, for almost every year for the last couple of years. Maybe I do, but also I have to stop myself and say, well, maybe a gun is a reactionary a tendency when we really need to focus on reforming and restructuring the system. What is transforming this world where people feel so healed, so grounded, so safe that they don't even desire, it never even crosses their mind to have a gun, right? That's the world that I want to live in. I don't want to live in a world where I am worried about my own safety and how I'm going to protect myself. I want to live in a world where I'm more concerned about what the future looks like than what my personal safety looks like.
Yoji, jump in and put this in the perspective that you have uniquely from Bahia in South America, because still Black community, all communities experiencing variations on the theme of violence within the community, violence between young people, violence of the system that is oppression intended, and that results in, you know, marginalized people. What are you thinking? What do you say about what our experiences are from an international perspective or from the Brazil perspective?
hmm greetings, everybody. Well, this it seems this question of violence by guns it's spreading worldwide. Here too, it is something that you hear daily. Um, in a weekend here in Bahia, for example, it's a city has 3.5 million people living. So it's similar population of Minneapolis, St. Paul, and the metro area together. There is at least 50 homicides every weekend.
Well,
Not talking about during the week, and this is being exacerbated by the presence in the last few years of guns in the style of the United States, where the gun ownership has been liberalized and a lot of more people do have guns here. So to me, I think the issue of guns, if you look back, it starts in the colonial era, and it's because of fear. And fear, why they want to get armed is because they have fear, or the people that are enslaved, or the indigenous people. So that the culture of guns, at least in the Americas, is because a last resort to them keep away those people that are undesirable in those societies. So because in my point of view, I'm a man who does martial arts. I don't see any need to carry a gun or even any need to resort to violence in many situations where we can do talk, like, right? When we have enough vocabulary, we don't curse and we don't shout and offend others.
we talk.
Yeah, we talk.
And that's a
So
quarter, that's a question partly of instruction and expectation of training, right? And of infusing the talk solution as a solution of preference that preserves life and in a sense can lead to, results that don't eliminate life. What do you think?
well, violence is I think a resort to violence, attack somebody. It's the weak who does that. It's the coward who does that. It's the one who is in fear, might be a perceived fear for their life. Those person who cannot stand their ground uh, with the only the existence. I understand there are situations that we are really threatened you know, but still there is so many cases of people that were not presenting threats to anybody or any situation that were dangerous that's been killed. And it's because this with the spread of this extreme right wing ideology worldwide, people are resorting to justice on their own because they are seeing less value in the life of the opposer, be that opposer a perceived enemy or just somebody who has a different opinion than that one expressed by or the mainstream or by the one has the the gun. So we need
Well,
to the
Yogi,
society
let
at
me ask
all.
you what your sense is of, the proposition I made earlier that comes out of my discussions where I said that uh, more now people in our African community are saying that we are so, beleaguered by the violence that yes, we really do want systems to remove the threat, meaning take people off the street, meaning imprison people. And my response to that is I kind of understand the frustration, but I don't think we should surrender our responsibility to create peace. And so my answer is that yes, we want the systems to eliminate threats in terms of people having weapons that they don't need and the proliferation of those, and in terms of creating an alternative method for conflict resolution that you have to train and educate for. But whose responsibility is it to do that? And how do we assert our own ability to be the authors, creators, organizers of a politic and of a practice that originates from within us, that also reflects our sense of dignity and our sense of sovereignty as human beings?
I think the responsibility is the village's responsibility of all of us. Also, those responsibilities starts at home. So we have, you know, our first experience of violence generally are in our own families, and we need to, in certain way, start to revisit how we deal with our own,
Mm,
our own children, grandchildren, siblings, how the elders of our families uh, uh, treat us or in not threatening. So violence, it percolates everything, but sometimes just a perceived threat, or even though you cannot expect to be that peace and love world that we wanted in the 60s, but we do need to temperate more, and I think this responsibility starts also from everyone. Not usage of violent language. For example, I hear all the time people, I'm fighting for this. This person is a warrior, and as used as a positive, but it's already you know emulation of violence because I'm fighting for this thing. So not everything that we need to have some difficulty to achieve means to be a fight. And these analogies of fighting and war and be a warrior, it's common now. All of a sudden everybody's a warrior because of this. Everybody, you know. Um, uh, so the terminology and violence is everywhere, you
mhm.
know and of course the state too, and those people who have those tendency already of cowardice, tendency of disrespect for the humanity of the others. They feel many times embodied to do it, or even propelled to do. As you say, this person who did that crime in New York, that he spends his days watching right-wing news, he's been conditioned to respond in that way because he see anybody doesn't look like him. Also, I don't know, find somebody else that looks like him. His was pretty odd looking, but nobody, everybody who looks not look like him, he finds as a threat. He cannot distinguish between a teenager black person and an adult black person. Just the fact of being black is a reason to be shooting, you know. And we all agree that needs to stop, but I think it's just increasing, and I don't see how it's gonna be able to turn around this mentality, you know.
Yusuf, in the last 3-4 minutes here before I end this segment, have you thought about, been watching what's happening in Sudan? No, we didn't discuss this in advance, but you know what I always come to is if the question of white was off the table, how would we be? And so now we have a question of white not being, at least on the surface or on the table in Khartoum, but a war now that has taken a couple of hundred lives so far between two feuding generals, one in the government that was promising to return to civilian rule after the ouster of the former president, and the second in command who had a special military unit, those two at war, and a nation of ordinary people in trouble and getting killed. And that in the backdrop of the war that had gone on between Sudan, the government in Khartoum, and the fighters who were looking for freedom from that government to create the nation that's the newest nation in the world, that nation of South Sudan. Have you followed any of that, Yusuf? Unmute.
Thank you. I haven't followed it very closely, but I'm reminded of something we used to say back in the day, as the kids referred to it, that under colonialism, somebody else shoots us. Under neocolonialism, we get to shoot ourselves. And I think that, unfortunately, one nation is too many, but in far too many nations on the continent, we do see a form of neocolonialism or political division resulting in wanton death and massacres across the landscape, which is really unfortunate because it's self-inflicted and it does not promote anything positive, anything life-giving, anything that will produce a living legacy for that country and that community.
Yusuf, thank you. Angela, thank you. Yoji, thank you. This has been a great conversation. We'll keep it going. I want to spend the balance of the program in a section we've been doing on a regular basis, thanks to our books editor, W.D. Foster Graham. W.D. is here today with another author. W.D., good afternoon, brother. How you doing? Unmute, please. Unmute.
Good afternoon. It's great to be here.
Well, great to see you once again. Introduce our author and set up the conversation. Let's have a great conversation.
Well, I am definitely thrilled to introduce our guest author. Her name is Cheryl Barton. As you know, for my reading, one of my favorite readings is romance, and I'm definitely all about Black love. And Cheryl Barton from DC area brings that in spades. She is not only an author, she is also a publisher. Because as I say, we definitely need to have more independent publishers out there. And the book that I reviewed, which she wrote, was A Christmas Wish. It hits you on all, as you say, the kids say, all the feels, talking about Black love, talking about friendships, talking about exes, talking about sisterhood. So it is my great pleasure to bring to you Cheryl Barton.
Thank you, WD. Good afternoon, everybody. Hello, hello. Now, I can't hear Al.
Well, the thing while Al is working on the sound issues,
Okay.
Cheryl, tell me about your career as a romance author about Black love. Or the things that inspired you to write this book? I mean, I love it.
Thank you. Thank you. Absolutely. And I love it as well. I love all things romance. And I think that's how you and I connected on social media, is our mutual love for uh, reading and writing romance as well. But my journey started many years ago, back around 2010 or so, when I lost my oldest brother. And it was a struggle for me. So I needed to have and find an outlet to deal with the feelings that I was feeling, the things I couldn't seem to get out. In other words, trying to deal with living in a world without my brother. And then I just sort of turned to writing one day. I heard writing was therapeutic. So I turned to writing one day. And the first book that I wrote, it started out as a project for school. And the students in the class seemed to really love when it was my time to present on the book that I chose for this to write for the semester. And so I turned that project into a book. And then family and friends supported me, and fans started coming on saying how much they loved that book. And that book led to a second book. That second book led to a third book. And then that third book eventually led to about, I'm now on book maybe 43 or 44. And A Christmas Wish is connected in there. And that pretty much came about because, again, I love romance. I love happy ever after type stories, but I also love Christmas, and not just Christmas gift giving and things like that, but Christmas when it comes to just the old ideology when I grew up and I believed in Santa Claus. And so I went back to my past, my history, and thought about how Santa Claus could make a wish come true for a firefighter and his little girl who wished upon a tree for a family, for love, for him, for romance. For her, she wanted love and forever for her dad. And so that's where that story came about. It came about of him as a fire captain meeting a high-powered, high-profile actress, someone that he would not normally connect with. And most of my stories, a lot of my stories are based out of Maryland, or at least connected to Maryland, where I was born and raised, and still absolutely love Maryland. Shout out to Baltimore City and Harford County, where I live now. And so, writing that, it was just them connecting and finding each other, and then wishing upon that tree that they could find the love that they had hoped for. They both ended up wishing upon that tree. So anything love, romance, I love writing. I know you know that as well. I just love writing. I love reading about it. And if it brings a smile to someone's face, that's what's most important, especially in the world that we're living in today. We need everything that can make somebody smile.
I hope my audio is back. Can you guys hear me now? Okay,
Yeah.
great. A fascinating question. Can you make a living as a writer? Would you encourage people to pursue that, not only for the pleasure, the joy, the fulfillment that creativity, brings you, but is there a practical side, a business that makes sense that we get involved? What do you think?
There is. And for me now, I do work full time. So at this point in my life, I consider my writing as a hobby. And I must say, I have done really well. It's been quite successful, a successful journey for me. And it can be for anyone if you dedicate yourself to the craft itself. There are organizations out here, there are groups out here. I belong to the Contemporary Romance Writers. It's a national online romance writers group. They help out people who have an interest in writing romance. There are Facebook groups, there are Instagram groups, there are other groups where people can help you. And when I decided back in 2015 or 16, I had a friend who wanted to put a book out, and I had been through the journey, the ups and the downs. And so I offered to help with that process, which eventually turned into me publishing books for other people who could not figure out how to get there. But that was their start. It was my start, and I wanted to help someone get their start as well. And it can be absolutely a career in writing. As you know, if you look at all the authors that are out here who are very successful. Anyone can be successful if they put the time in. I consider myself successful even though I write part-time. Someone may say, well, you've written 40 books. How do you write 40 books since 2013 and you do it part-time? When I'm not working, when I'm someplace in a restaurant, or if I'm just kind of relaxing down, hanging out with my parents for the day, I may take something out and start outlining a book. So it's possible. A lot of people are doing it, and people who sit on the edge and say, I don't know if that's for me, you won't know it unless you try.
What do we need in our community? I think entrepreneurship in whatever form it takes is a good thing. So I
Yes.
wanted you to speak to this whole idea of entrepreneurship and how you feel about it. Part of that, I think you've answered by saying you're still working somewhere. So you must be a very practical person on the one hand, but
Yes.
you've also managed to create and run a business that is
Yes.
successful at the same time. And so at what point and how do we encourage our people to explore entrepreneurship in the book publishing, the book writing world? There is, like in music, there was the idea that you had to go to Random House or you had to go to one of the big labels to
Right.
get printed. And if you couldn't, you'd never get printed. It wasn't worthwhile. You wouldn't get any money. But technology is allowing individuals to do what corporations were only able to do a generation ago. So the barriers to entry have reduced significantly, plus the opportunity to look at markets, not just your close friend,
Mhm.
but people from around the world that you can reach digitally now and you couldn't a generation ago. What does that mean for the future? And what do you expect is going to be happening in the world of Black literature, Black writing, Black bookmaking, not only locally but globally? What's your view, your vision?
As a Black writer, I think we are finally coming to the realization that there are people who say, I've written to this publishing house or that publishing house and they won't accept me, and people are always complaining. I don't see enough work from people of color, but it's the people of color who need to make those lanes, who need to make those things happen for ourselves. We a lot of times, and that's in anything, but mainly in books, a lot of times we depend on someone else in order to help us grow or help us thrive or help us really get out there, or to even help us be successful. And I say there is a path out there that does not have to go through what people say are those big five. Now, I have the most respect for them all. I've never submitted to publish through one of them. And that's because, I do work full time, and that is my priority. Family is my priority. I write when I have an opportunity. I don't stick to a deadline, so I do things on my own time, on my own timeline. But, there was a time where when these publishing houses would sort of take just about anybody, but now you reach out to them, from what I'm hearing, and they'll say, well, when you build up your social media platform, then maybe you come back to me in a couple of years when you have a couple of 20, 30,000 followers on social media, so that we know that your book will sell. And my thing is, well, there were many years ago, before social media, when we didn't have anybody out here following us before we put a book out. Your followers came after that. And so my mindset, when I'm talking to other people who are thinking about writing a book, and they're saying, well, how do I submit to these big publishers? My thing is, if you want to do that, give it a try. But you can go out here now and find on YouTube or anywhere on the internet, you can find instructions and how to do anything. And that's what I did. I sat down one day and I searched everything on the internet. I found free books on how to set up self-publishing, how to do cover design, because I do my own cover designs as well. Cover design, how to lay out the interior, and check all those things. Get people to read, get family and friends to read your stories for you, and offer you criticism on them. We can make our own paths. I have readers in the UK and Canada, and all over the world. You see them when you get your reports of where your books are sold. I'm just amazed at the number of people outside of the United States who actually are reading my books, and they reach out to me. So the audience is there. You don't have to wait for someone else to create that for you. We have the means and the power to do it. And now publishing houses and other people are noticing that. I've had some editors and some agents reach out to me and say, hey, so I saw you, doing an interview here. I have quite a few people who told me they saw the review that was done by WD. Thank you again so much for that. people who had never reached out to me before and saying, I'd like to interview you and I'd like to write about you on my blog. So it's possible. Just don't give up. That's the one thing I say to anybody who's interested, no matter the color, especially people of color. Don't give up.
Here's a good question. A good
Yes.
question from Mr. Z Frank 56. Thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Z Frank, first of all. He said he feels like the readers will turn into writers. So the question is, how many books do you read a year?
I will tell you this. I would say, I'm going to not even say a year. I'm going to say in a month. I go to Barnes and Noble twice a month. And when I go to Barnes and Noble, and I do get some on Amazon, I probably buy about 20 books a month. And but I buy all genres. And I would say within a month, I probably read about 10 to 12 books a month because I love to read. I'll get up in my favorite spot here at home on a Saturday when I don't have anything to do. My parents may be on a cruise someplace because, I'm with them all the time. And it's like I have quiet moments and I will read a book in a day. No TV, no music, no anything. Because books allow me to direct my thoughts away from all the shootings, the things you talked about earlier, away from all the political drama that goes on all the time, the stresses from the full-time job I have during the day. I'm 36 years into a federal career. I love everything about it, but it's stressful.
What do you do? What do you do in your full-time?
I work for the Department of Health and Human Services and the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. And I am the outreach, education, and training lead for the health insurance marketplace.
Okay.
For the ACA. So I do a lot of outreach and education, and it's very stressful, but I love every moment of it. But I do need a break. And so the books, oh my goodness, the books let me, like they used to say years ago, Calgon, take me away. That's how I feel about books. Books take me away from all of that and give me something to smile about.
WD, how many books you read a year or a day or a month? You must be reading a lot.
Well, just like Cheryl, I'm a voracious reader. I have my phone with me, which I have on my Kindle. Last year, I read about 440 books.
Whoa.
Wow.
Whoa.
I'm like you, Cheryl. I need my time.
Yes.
And say books take me away.
It's important. Yes.
It is.
Reading's important, but so is writing. And like somebody mentioned, readers turn into writers. That's how I started. Love reading. There were years ago when I would read everything but romance. And a friend of my mother said, I have a bag of these romance books. See if your daughter wants to read. I was like, I don't want to read romance. And then one day I picked up a book like WD by Brenda Jackson. And that just turned my entire life around when it came to romance. Turned my life around.
Listen, Cheryl and WD, sorry to break you up. We're out of time.
Oh, okay.
What a great conversation. What a great conversation. I'm going to have you back because I think talking about books is the right thing to do. I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.